Independence is a lie. The real game is making sure others can't breathe without you. Law 11. 48 Laws of Power. Power is not just about strength, money, or charisma. It's about indispensability. In a world that worships independence, the cruel paradox is this: those who rise to true dominance are the ones who quietly build webs of dependence around them. They make others need them, and that need becomes the leash. At first glance, it sounds manipulative, immoral even. But peel back the layers of history, business, and human psychology, and you'll see dependence is not only common, it's foundational. People don't follow the strongest leader. They follow the one they can't afford to lose. We live in an age that romanticizes autonomy: the self-made entrepreneur, the independent thinker, the lone wolf. But here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud, independence is terrifying. It means risk, isolation, exposure. When things go wrong, and they always do, people run to those who provide safety, certainty, and resources, not ideals. Look around. The boss who holds the budget, the parent who pays the bills, the friend who controls the social circle. These people hold power not because of who they are, but because of what they control. Resources, access, influence. This law is not about being cruel. It's about being irreplaceable. In business, this means becoming the bottleneck for value. If your clients can replace you tomorrow, you're not powerful. You're temporary. The best consultants, engineers, marketers, they don't just deliver results. They build systems, knowledge, relationships that make them expensive to lose. Every spreadsheet they create, every connection they own, every nuance they handle. It becomes a silent contract. If you fire me, you bleed. In politics, it's even more blunt. Advisors and lobbyists don't hold power because they're liked. They hold it because their removal would cause chaos. They entangle themselves in the arteries of decision-making until cutting them out would be surgery. In relationships, professional or romantic, dependence operates in more subtle ways: emotional anchoring, convenience, skill sets, control of the narrative. People rarely stay in a relationship because it's perfect. They stay because leaving would break too much. But here's the warning: if you don't deliberately create dependence, someone else will. You will be the replaceable one. You will be the forgotten one. Let's zoom out. Why does this law work so reliably? Because the human brain is hardwired for security. Uncertainty is a threat. We form attachments to anything or anyone who reduces that uncertainty. The person who always has the answer. The partner who keeps the house running. The leader who makes chaos feel organized. These are the ones we cling to, even if we don't like them. Dependence is not about kindness. It's about survival. And people will tolerate, obey, even worship those they depend on. There's a reason kingdoms had food stores locked away by kings. A reason why modern tech companies lock in users through ecosystems. A reason why powerful people keep their networks closed and their knowledge undocumented. It's not an accident, it's architecture. The most dangerous mistake you can make is to empower others without securing dependence in return. If you give people freedom, power, tools, and don't build a tether, you become obsolete, generous, admirable, but ultimately forgettable. We've all seen this happen. A visionary founder builds a company, hires top talent, trains them, empowers them. And one day, the team walks out and builds a competitor. A mentor gives their student all their wisdom and is ghosted when the student rises. A lover gives everything: time, money, emotion, and is discarded the moment they're no longer needed. Why? Because they made others strong without making themselves essential. The lesson is not to stop giving. It's to give strategically, to always tie the gift with a thread of need. In power dynamics, Your position is only as strong as how much they fear losing you. And to be feared, not in a violent way, but in the economic and emotional sense, you must build dependence like a spider builds a web, quietly, patiently, and intentionally. You must become the resource, the supplier, the bridge, the glue. And the moment someone says, "I don't need you," you've already lost. This law will make some uncomfortable. Good. That means it's real. It doesn't tell you to exploit. It tells you to protect yourself in a world that moves fast, forgets faster, and replaces even faster. If you want to last, build what cannot be untied. If you want power, don't be everywhere. Be unforgettable where it matters. If you want control, never let them forget what happens when you're gone. Main historical example: Stalin, the master of dependence. In the chaotic power vacuum that followed Lenin's death in 1924, the future of the Soviet Union teetered on a knife's edge. A dozen powerful men, seasoned revolutionaries, military leaders, intellectuals, all saw themselves as heirs to the revolution. But one man, quiet and unassuming, already knew how the game would end. Not because he was the smartest, not because he was the most charismatic, but because he had spent years weaving a system of dependence around him so tight, so intricate, that no one could remove him without collapsing the system itself. His name was Joseph Stalin, and he was about to turn the Soviet machine into a mirror of his will. The challenge. At Lenin's death, Stalin was not the obvious successor. In fact, he was viewed by many as a secondary player, a bureaucrat, a gray functionary. Trotsky, on the other hand, was the intellectual firebrand, the hero of the Civil War, the ideological beacon. He had the mind, the words, the popularity. Stalin, he had files, he had access, he had the party. More importantly, he had patience and a vision. He didn't challenge Trotsky head-on. That would have sparked war. Instead, he did something far more lethal. He made the party depend on him, one bureaucratic sinew at a time. The strategy. Long before Lenin's death, Stalin had maneuvered himself into key roles that appeared dull on the surface, but were strategically priceless. People's Commissar for Nationalities, General Secretary of the Communist Party. That last title, General Secretary, seemed administrative, just a desk job. But it gave Stalin control over appointments, promotions, and regional placements. He wasn't shouting speeches in Red Square. He was quietly deciding who got power and who didn't. And as those people rose, one after another, they knew who to thank. More crucially, who to fear. He created an ecosystem of loyalty, not through ideology, but through carefully distributed dependence. Regional officials, military commanders, factory directors, all owed their positions to Stalin. He didn't demand their love. He demanded their need. While Trotsky wrote essays, Stalin built levers. While others debated Marx, Stalin installed men who would not survive a week without him. He reshaped the party not with speeches, but with selections. And slowly the air tightened around him. Dependence, power. When the time came to challenge Trotsky directly, Stalin didn't attack. He allowed the system to do it for him. Party members denounced Trotsky not because they believed in Stalin's ideology, but because they understood that siding against Stalin meant exile. Or worse, by the late 1920s, Stalin had turned the Central Committee into a fortress of his own making. Even the Politburo, the top leadership, became filled with men who owed him everything. Many of them would later be purged, of course, but at the time they were pawns, protected only by their usefulness. This wasn't loyalty born of belief. It was the loyalty of a man clinging to a raft in a storm, not because he trusts the raft, but because there's no other option. That's what true dependence looks like. By the 1930s, Stalin's grip was absolute. Every lever, security, industry, propaganda, was in the hands of people who could not imagine surviving without him. And when paranoia struck, as it inevitably did, He didn't need to convince anyone to act. They moved preemptively, terrified of being seen as insufficiently dependent. Even his enemies whispered his name. Even his allies feared his silence. This is the dark power of strategic dependence. You don't have to shout. People destroy themselves just to stay in your shadow. The legacy. Stalin's reign was brutal, repressive, and soaked in blood. But it was also a masterclass in structural control. He didn't just rule a country. He rewired its nervous system so that every signal passed through him. No decision, no promotion, no shipment, no death sentence happened without his network knowing. He centralized dependence, not just in people, but in processes. And long after his death, that architecture lingered. Even as Khrushchev denounced Stalin, the centralized machine remained. Because to dismantle it would have meant dismantling the entire Soviet identity. That's the ultimate power. To build a system where your removal causes collapse. Not through violence, through structure. What we learn: Stalin didn't rise because he was loved. He rose because he was needed. Or more accurately, because he made sure others had no way to function without him. This is the heart of the 11th law. Do not try to be liked. Do not try to be the hero. Be the source, the hub, the architect of their survival. Because when people need you, they will protect you, obey you, fear you, and even kill for you. Power isn't held, it's embedded. Just like Stalin embedded himself into the bones of a nation, not with passion, but with patience. Psychological/strategic mechanism. Why dependence is power. Dependence is a paradox. Most people resist it for themselves, but unconsciously seek it in others. At the heart of every human interaction is a simple power equation. Who needs whom more? The person who can walk away always holds the advantage. The one who can't clings, complies, obeys. This law works because it taps into the deepest survival instinct in the human brain: the need for safety, certainty, and access to resources. In ancient tribes, dependence meant survival. You needed the chief for protection, the hunter for food, the healer for health. And in return, you gave loyalty, service, obedience. Our minds haven't evolved past that tribal code. Even in modern society, where independence is worshipped, the brain still equates resource access with safety. And when you become someone's access point to money, status, ideas, opportunity, they anchor to you. The neuroscience of dependence. Neurochemically, dependence activates powerful feedback loops. When someone feels grateful to you for solving their problem, advancing their career, or granting them a favor, dopamine and oxytocin are released. These hormones create feelings of pleasure, trust, and bonding. Over time, the brain begins to associate you with emotional safety. You become a source, like water in a desert. And once someone's brain tags you as necessary, they begin to exhibit loyalty behaviors. They check in more often, seek your approval, avoid upsetting you, and compete for your attention. These are not conscious decisions. They are limbic responses, driven by a survival instinct to preserve access to the resource. Now reverse that lens. When you allow someone to become too self-sufficient, when they no longer need you to survive or win, they begin to unconsciously devalue your presence. The dopamine fades, the sense of urgency vanishes, and in time they drift, or worse, compete. This is why independence in others is a long-term threat to your power. The more self-sufficient they become, the more replaceable you become. Unless you build the system to ensure their independence still depends on you. The strategic core of dependence. Power is not about shouting orders. It's about being the bridge no one else can cross without your permission. That bridge might be a key client only you can access, a skill no one else can replicate, a network you own, a system only you understand, an idea that originated with you and requires your guidance. This is structural power. It doesn't require charisma. It requires design. The more others need your presence to function, the more control you hold, silently. And the genius of this law lies in its subtlety. If you make people feel like prisoners, they'll revolt. But if you make them believe you're their freedom, they will protect the cage. Scarcity creates attachment. Psychologically, humans respond to scarcity by overvaluing the source. When something, or someone, is perceived as rare, difficult to access, or irreplaceable, the brain amplifies its value. This is known as the scarcity heuristic. We assume what's hard to get must be worth more. So, when you limit access to yourself, when you delay your responses, when you make your skills difficult to replicate, when you choose where and when to appear, you cultivate an illusion of scarcity, and the brain of the other person amplifies your value accordingly. Over time, this leads to asymmetry of power. Not through force, but through designed perception. You become the well in the desert. Dependency breeds loyalty and fear. There is a dark brilliance to how dependency wires behavior. People don't betray the source of their comfort unless they're sure there's a better one. And if you've been wise enough to remove the alternatives, the loyalty remains, not from love, but from calculation. You don't need people to like you. You need them to calculate that leaving you would be worse. This is how empires are built. Stalin didn't demand adoration, he demanded reliance. Apple doesn't demand love. It builds an ecosystem so sticky, leaving feels like losing your limbs. Amazon doesn't beg you to stay. It becomes so convenient, your life feels slower without it. In each case, power flows from dependence, not charisma. Why independence in others is dangerous. Most people celebrate when those around them grow stronger, more skilled, more confident. It feels like good leadership. But in power games, others' independence is a threat unless carefully managed. Because once someone no longer needs you, they begin to challenge your ideas. Dobrelite your success. Question your role. Seek autonomy. Replace you? This is not malice. It's nature. Freedom always seeks more freedom. So your job, if you seek to maintain control, is not to stop growth, but to ensure that growth loops back to you. You can promote their success, but only if you remain the infrastructure behind it. Mentors, for example, often lose their students because they make them too independent. A wiser approach is to guide them while subtly maintaining intellectual or emotional dominance. A skill they haven't mastered, a network they don't yet have, a higher perspective only you can provide. Control the oxygen. Let them breathe, but never without you. Invisible chains are the strongest. The best dependence is the kind no one sees. Obvious manipulation creates resentment. Subtle influence creates devotion. When you become someone's silent partner in success, when your support is taken for granted but cannot be replaced, you've embedded yourself in their operating system. They don't even see the influence anymore, but they feel it when it's gone. That's when you know you've won. Secondary examples. Case studies in dependency. 1. Steve Jobs and the Apple ecosystem. Steve Jobs didn't just sell devices, he built a self-contained world. Every product, from the iPhone to the MacBook, was meticulously designed to work seamlessly only within Apple's ecosystem. Want your photos to sync? Use iCloud. Want to share files? Use AirDrop. Want your apps to work across devices? Stay in the ecosystem. This wasn't accidental. Jobs understood that technical brilliance alone wouldn't keep customers loyal. Dependency would. By locking users into a smooth, exclusive environment, Apple ensured people would think twice before switching brands. Even professionals became trapped. Filmmakers with Final Cut, designers with Mac-only software, developers needing iOS testing. Jobs' genius was making the dependency feel like luxury. He didn't just create fans, he created digital prisoners who thanked him for the cage. Apple wasn't just a brand. It became a system people couldn't leave without burning everything down. 2. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the savior politician. During the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced the New Deal, a sweeping series of reforms, agencies, and public programs designed to stabilize the American economy. While many of these initiatives were genuinely helpful, Roosevelt's true political genius lay in how he made the entire nation, especially the elite, dependent on his continued leadership. Farmers relied on government subsidies. Unions depended on federal protection. Big business leaders got favorable contracts. Even the media found itself in alignment with Roosevelt's policies, subtly manipulated by the access he granted or denied. Roosevelt didn't just provide aid, he built a vast web of strategic dependencies. Each major power bloc in America had a reason to keep him in office. It's no coincidence that he was elected 4 times, more than any other president in U.S. history. He understood a key truth: when people need you to survive, they will never vote against you. Third, Mao Zedong, master of ideological dependence. While military control gave Mao Zedong power in China, it was his manipulation of ideological dependence that ensured his long-term dominance. Through relentless propaganda, rewrites of history, and the indoctrination of youth during the Cultural Revolution, Mao positioned himself as the only true source of truth and salvation. Citizens didn't just follow orders, they worshipped his image, memorized his quotes, and repeated slogans like mantras. The Little Red Book became not just a symbol of communism, but a symbol of Mao himself. Dissent was reframed not just as rebellion, but as betrayal of survival. By the time he unleashed the Red Guards, young people turned on their own families to prove loyalty. Mao had weaponized dependence so deeply that people feared their own independent thought. Even after catastrophic policies like the Great Leap Forward, millions still revered him. Dependency doesn't always wear chains. Sometimes it wears a uniform and holds a flag. 4. Bob Knight, the tyrannical mentor. In the world of college basketball, Bob Knight was legendary, not just for his coaching success, but for the way he made his players dependent on him emotionally and professionally. Knight ran his programs with military precision and psychological pressure. He broke players down, then rebuilt them in his image. Many of his star athletes, like Isaiah Thomas, credited him for their success, but also admitted that stepping out from under his influence was terrifying. Knight created an environment where loyalty equaled survival. If you defied him, you didn't just risk losing minutes on the court, you risked your future. Knight's mentorship wasn't just teaching, it was psychological conditioning. Even after leaving his program, many former players struggled with guilt, identity confusion, or fear of disappointing coach. He didn't raise free men, he raised believers. So, each of these examples shows a different domain: technology, politics, ideology, mentorship. But the core pattern is the same. Dependency breeds power. Whether through tools, laws, belief systems, or personal loyalty, these figures made themselves indispensable. And in doing so, they created fortresses of influence that no opposition could easily penetrate. When people need you more than they like you, they won't leave, even when they should. Beginner mistakes: how rookies lose power by liberating others. Most people enter power dynamics with good intentions, or at least with naive ones. They believe in merit, fairness, and mutual benefit. They think that if they help others grow, they will be respected and rewarded in kind. So they teach, they share, they give, they empower, and they are left behind. Let's begin with the first classic mistake: teaching too much, too soon. It feels noble to share everything you know with someone you mentor, employ, or collaborate with. It flatters the ego to be seen as the wise teacher, the generous leader, the open book. But in doing so, rookies often destroy their most powerful asset: exclusivity. The moment your student knows all you know, the moment your employee learns how to do the job without guidance, the moment your client no longer needs your insight, you become redundant. You taught them to fish, and they fished you out. This is particularly true in creative, technical, and entrepreneurial circles, where knowledge is power. Many first-time managers or freelancers fall into this trap. Eager to prove their value, they over-explain their process, teach their clients everything about the system, or train junior staff too thoroughly. The intention may be noble, but the outcome is often fatal. They become replaceable. Power is not just about being good, it's about being needed. The second mistake follows naturally from the first, making others too independent. In our modern age, independence is seen as a virtue, something to be encouraged in teams, friends, even romantic partners. But in the game of power, encouraging too much autonomy is a strategic error. When people don't need you, they eventually don't want you. Their loyalty fades. Their gratitude becomes distant memory. Their ambition overrides their past alliance. This happens all the time in startups. Founders hire hungry, talented people and give them freedom. Eventually, those same people start their own companies or get poached by competitors. Why? Because they were allowed and even encouraged to grow without boundaries. True power players never make that mistake. They build loyalty through dependency, not freedom. They hold key relationships, resources, or pieces of knowledge hostage, not through coercion, but through calculated scarcity. They don't give full freedom. They give curated access. If you want to stay irreplaceable, make sure the bridge only goes halfway. A third mistake rookies make is giving away their most valuable resources without anchoring dependency. This is different from generosity. True generosity in power games is always tied to return. A future favor, a debt, an alignment. But rookies often give without structure. They offer high-level connections, premium tools, intellectual property, or strategic insights to people who have no reason to stay loyal. And once those gifts are consumed, the relationship evaporates. It's not that you can't give. You must, but strategically. Only give when what you're offering makes them more tied to you. If you give someone a tool, it should be one only you can maintain. If you share knowledge, it should open a door only you can guide them through. If you connect them to someone powerful, make sure they know that connection only exists through you. Otherwise, you're just transferring power away from yourself. But the most dangerous mistake of all is believing in pure generosity in a world built on survival. Rookies often tell themselves that, if I'm kind, helpful, and sincere, it will come back to me. They believe that their value will be recognized because the world is fair, or because people are decent. They underestimate the cold mechanics of power, that people don't stay loyal to virtue. They stay loyal to benefit. Ask yourself, if someone had to choose between you and their own ambition, what would they choose? Powerful people understand that even love is conditional on need. Influence doesn't rest on character. It rests on utility. When that utility vanishes, so does the relationship. This doesn't mean you should become cruel or manipulative. It means you must wake up. Understand that in any hierarchy, your survival depends on what you control, not what you contribute. You can be generous, but never expose your full hand. You can be kind, but never forget your position. You can teach, but always reserve the one thing they need you for. Let's be clear, independence isn't just ungrateful, it's dangerous to those who hold power. A subordinate who becomes too capable threatens your role. A client who internalizes your entire system no longer needs your services. A partner who learns how to navigate without you becomes a rival. That's not betrayal, it's nature. If you want to stay essential, you must embed yourself into the infrastructure of their success. Be the architect they can't fire, the software they can't replace, the mentor they can't fully decode. Power is not about presence, it's about dependency. The most powerful people in history weren't the strongest or loudest. They were the ones whose absence would collapse the system. That's your goal. So if you're new to this game, Resist the urge to prove yourself by giving everything away. Don't teach everything you know. Don't hand out power like candy. Don't believe that goodwill will protect you. Be helpful, but mysterious. Be generous, but calculated. Be supportive, but irreplaceable. Because in the end, the world doesn't remember the nicest. It remembers the necessary. Actionable tactics. How to build strategic dependency without losing yourself. In theory, dependency sounds manipulative. In practice, it's how ecosystems work. Every powerful figure, whether a CEO, politician, artist, or spiritual leader, learns to create value that others can't access elsewhere. Not because they are the only source in the universe, but because they position themselves as the essential gate. This section is not about tricks, it's about architecture. How to design your relationships and your positioning so that others see you as vital, even when you're silent. The art of control isn't about domination, it's about being the one piece they can't remove from the puzzle. Let's break it down. 1. Become a source, not a commodity. If people can get what you offer from 10 other places, you're a commodity. You will be replaced, ignored, or underpaid. But if you become a source, the first place people think of when they need a specific outcome, you become sticky, valuable, embedded. Ask yourself, what do I offer that no one else does in the way that I do it? This could be access to a niche audience, unique insight from deep experience, a signature creative style, connections others don't have, a stabilizing emotional presence in chaos, a system they can't replicate. The key is specificity. Don't just be a good designer or a reliable friend. Be the one person who can unlock X. Then remind people gently, through consistent results, that you are the pipeline, not just a player. 2. Control the system, not the output. The most powerful individuals don't try to micromanage people. Instead, they control the structure, the system through which outcomes are achieved. Here's how that works in practice. Build workflows that only you can optimize. If you're in a team, design processes around your tools or your frameworks. Make your presence the lever that keeps things moving smoothly. Gatekeep access to something scarce, like talent, clients, capital, or ideas. Not out of selfishness, but to ensure people go through you, not around you. Can create knowledge asymmetry. That means revealing just enough for others to act, but never the full blueprint. Let them execute, but let them rely on your calibration. Own infrastructure. In a business, that might be owning the client list, managing the tech stack, or being the person who knows how to navigate legal, compliance, or interpersonal politics. If you design the map, you don't need to lead the expedition. They'll still follow your coordinates. 3. Share selectively. Teach incompletely. This is where rookies often fail. They assume that withholding knowledge is unethical. But total transparency is not a virtue in power dynamics. It's a vulnerability. Instead of giving away everything you know, break your expertise into modules. Only teach what's relevant to the person's current stage. Save the deeper logic for those who prove loyalty, investment, or strategic alignment. When mentoring or leading, leave strategic gaps that require your interpretation. Give them tools, but hold the lens. Use asymmetric delegation. Assign tasks that give people ownership, but keep decision-making centralized. You want people to grow, yes, but not to the point where they outgrow your role in their life. Teach them how to climb the mountain, but don't give them the map, the supplies, and the helicopter. 4. Make yourself a gateway, not a competitor. Dependency isn't just about what you do. It's about how others perceive your role in their progress. You want to be seen as the enabler, not the rival. That means help others win, but always in a way that ties their win to your presence. Position yourself as a bridge between them and money, influence, opportunities, insight, or status. Let them shine, but remind them, tactfully, that the stage was yours to offer. Never be jealous when someone rises under you. Be strategic. Make sure their rise is built on your platform. That way, their success becomes a monument to your importance. 5. Seed future dependency in every interaction. Every powerful player knows how to plant hooks that create future pull. That might look like offering conditional value. I can give you access to this now, but let's keep working together long-term. Creating cycles of engagement. Design offers, insights, or interactions that naturally lead to the next phase with you. Withholding the final puzzle piece, give them clarity, but keep the last 10% locked, unless they stay close. You don't need to be manipulative. You need to be intentional. Make every offer a loop, not a line. 6. Build emotional dependency, not just functional ties. Some of the strongest dependencies aren't based on skill or access. They're based on emotion. Make people feel safer when you're around, and smarter when they consult you, stronger when they're aligned with you. Plus, when you disappear, that kind of pull can't be replaced by information. It's built through presence, identity, and timing. In personal relationships, this means becoming their emotional anchor, but keeping your center. In business, this means being more than just a contractor. Be the one they trust when everything falls apart. 7. Never build without embedding yourself. If you help someone build a business, a movement, or even a personal brand, make sure you embed your values structurally. This could mean equity, long-term contracts, strategic interdependence. You own one part, they own another. Brand alignment. They can't publicly separate from you without losing value. The worst thing you can do is build someone else's empire and get locked out of the gates. What to avoid at all costs? Don't teach everything. Let mystery preserve your role. Don't give away unique access unless you control the gateway. Don't let them internalize your system without you. Don't believe loyalty is permanent. Dependency is the only true currency in power games. Dependency, when built with care, doesn't breed resentment. It breeds alignment. It says, I help you win, and in doing so, you need me. It's not slavery, it's strategic symbiosis. And in the long game, the one who's hardest to replace quietly rules the board. Power, in its rawest form, is not about intimidation or brute strength. It is about necessity, about becoming so essential to others that your absence becomes unthinkable. This law, when stripped to its core, is not about cruelty. It is about survival in a world where independence is romanticized but rarely rewarded. True power does not announce itself. It is felt in the quiet panic someone experiences when they realize they can't move forward without you. Modern culture glorifies the idea of self-sufficiency, but the uncomfortable truth is that those who rise the highest often do so not by being independent, but by making others dependent on them. In politics, in business, in relationships, those who cannot be replaced shape the game. They are not always the loudest, nor the most talented, but they are the most necessary. They create ecosystems in which their value is embedded in every outcome. Dependency is not always visible. It isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as subtle as being the only one who can solve a certain problem, or the person whose insight consistently clears the fog for others, or the voice that calms the storm. Over time, these moments stack, and before anyone realizes it, a web is formed. Not a trap, a system, one that you quietly built, with patience, intention, and design. People fear being perceived as manipulative when they withhold too much, teach too little, or keep others close through strategic limitation. But there is a deeper, more brutal reality. If you empower others to be entirely self-sufficient Without maintaining a bond of interdependence, you risk becoming obsolete. Not because you're worthless, but because you gave everything and built nothing that needs you to endure. Power is not about hoarding, it's about designing relationships that work for both sides, but where your role is non-negotiable. The mentor who teaches, but not fully. The advisor who gives clarity, but never the whole playbook. The leader who lifts others up, but always remains the root system. That's not ego, that's architecture. If you want to be free, if you want to live on your own terms, you must ensure that others cannot live entirely on theirs. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. Because in the ecosystem of power, someone is always dependent on someone else. And if it's not them on you, it will be you on them. So be generous, but strategic. Share, but never all. Build others, but tie their strength to your presence. Make yourself the sun in their system, so that as they orbit, they never forget where the gravity comes from. Power is not about being above others. It's about being needed by them. The moment they can walk without you, you become a memory. But when you design it right, your absence becomes impossible. And that is the quiet, unshakable authority of those who understand this law. If you're learning more here than you ever did in school, that's no accident. This channel is built for those who crave strategic power, not theory. Subscribe now and don't miss what's next. In Law 12, use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. We'll expose the deadly art of weaponized sincerity. How a single moment of vulnerability can lower all defenses and give you total control.